Less than a century after the Black Death, the fabulous illuminated manuscripts of the Middle Ages become relics. Gutenberg's printing press has put them out of business.
All the industries that we really associate with later processes of industrialization start to emerge in the late 14th century, and you could argue that they emerge partly as a response to the labor crisis precipitated by the plague.
Still, the greatest impact of the plague is not in the battlefields or factories, but in the human heart.
I can't even imagine the anguish that would have occurred from a parent or a child watching a parent get sick. Take young people who may have seen their parents die, surviving in the 1350s, but with that memory of death all around them, so that death became a common sight.
Well, I think there is lots of evidence that there was a psychological transformation affected by the plague and by the sudden dramatic disappearance of so many people.
Death clings to their imaginations like a menacing shadow and creeps into the late medieval art known as danse macabre.
The kind of Dutch paintings you see with skeletons dancing and with a kind of memento mori, just remember death. Death is everywhere.
In time, the social upheaval of the post-plague years, the questioning attitudes and increased individualism all lead to the greatest flowering of culture and knowledge in European history. The Renaissance. The Renaissance in Italy shows the extraordinary resilience of human society, a tenacity and creative energy that sustained it through the plague's darkest years.
It was as if Europe had suddenly switched off and then back on again. And the Black Death had done that.
But today, many scientists wonder how well modern society would emerge from a similar cataclysm. For killer microbes still exist in remote regions, waiting for a host to take them to our modern population centers. By 1348, the Black Death has traveled from Sicily to England, carried in trade ships aboard the backs of rats. Already it has claimed the lives of millions. In every village, in every farm, the corpses pile up in staggering numbers, creating a new crisis: how to dispose of the dead.
If you lose 10% of 95,000 people, think about that. That's 10,000 people. How do you bury 10,000 people that have been lost in a very short period of time? Where do you find the people to take them? Where do you find the people? Where do you find the carts to take them?
The only people who were willing to carry away the dead were these very rustic, uncouth men or women who came down from the mountains or from the surrounding countryside, who were willing for very high fees to take away the dead and have contact with the dead.
The smells must have been very difficult, and people tried to accommodate that by having fires and having sweet smells around. They tried to cover up the smell of death, but you can only go so far with that.
In 1349, graves must be found for nearly 300 people a day in London. The situation is even worse in Avignon. In one 6-week period, 11,000 people are buried in a single graveyard. The Pope is finally driven to consecrate the Rhone River. Countless bodies are committed to a watery, unmarked grave. But perhaps even that is preferable to an Italian mass burial.
They were laid like layers of a lasagna. They would put the bottom layer, sprinkle a little dirt, a second layer, sprinkle a little dirt, third layer, sprinkle dirt.
In Siena, in the Tuscany region of Italy, the toll is literally unbearable. Fully half the population is reported dead. Siena citizen Agnolo de Tura raises a lament that has lost none of its poignancy after 6.5 centuries.
In many places, great pits were dug and piled deep with the multitude of the dead. And as soon as those ditches were filled, more were dug. I, Agnolo di Tura, buried my 5 children with my own hands. And so many died that all believed it was the end of the world.
In spite of the personal risk, some brave hearts hold fast, combating the mounting crisis. Many doctors have stopped seeing patients to save themselves. Not Guy de Chauliac.
He stayed. I think there was not just bravery, but a certain scientific curiosity there. He wanted to see what this great blazing demon was and how it worked.
Guy de Chauliac seems to do what a more modern medical practitioner would do, which is he doesn't understand the disease. So he takes part in helping individuals with the disease until he gets it, and then he writes about it.
In his remarkable journal, the careful surgeon catalogues all the symptoms of the disease while making note of which treatments seem to be most effective. In the summer of 1348, Guy de Chauliac is said to have prescribed fire itself as a preventative for Pope Clement VI. 4 great basins of oil and wood are set ablaze on either side of the Pope's throne, a fortress of flames against the ravages of the plague.
It gives us this image of the Pope running from society, so to speak, sequestered in an interior room that is now blazing hot with fires build up around him. Clemens formed his own hell, if you will, in order to keep out of the plague's region.
And if your dominant medical theory of disease causation is the miasmas and the bad vapours in the air, then if the smoke given off by the fire has a purifying effect, then clearly that makes some sort of sense in terms of warding off infection.
Whether by fire or luck, the Pope survives the plague. But Princess Joan, the favorite daughter of the King of England, does not. Like almost half the population of Europe, she falls victim to the Black Death. Her father, Edward III, is powerless to do anything but mourn.
Destructive death, who seizes young and old alike, has lamentably snatched from us our dearest daughter, whom we loved best of all.
All of the trappings of authority just disappear, and you see one human being, one grieving human being, and he's speaking to another person, and it's a voice that's immediately recognizable 700 years later, despite the trappings of authority.
All authority, medics, clerics, nobles, fail. And so the masses turn elsewhere for salvation. Along the Rhine region of Germany, the faithful decide to take matters into their own hands. They are known as the Flagellants.